Okay, I'm here with Haris Sultan. Haris Sultan, for those who don't know, is an ex-Muslim and author of the book The Curse of God: Why I Left Islam. Haris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sham. Thank you for finally having me.
I know. I must apologize live on air because I've been trying to set this up for a while, but something or the other bloody always comes up. But I'm very happy that we're actually able to do this today because uh, even though we've talked twice before, we've talked both times on Waleed's channel, and even though there's been some fireworks, but I've enjoyed talking to you. So I've been wanting to like get you on the show and talk because I think one of the things that becomes very clear or became very clear to me, I mean, it was already pretty clear to me, but it became even more clearer once I talked to someone like you, is that, disagreements are disagreements and they're there. But I think talking is such an important thing because uh, even though we disagreed on a bunch of stuff when we talked on Waleed's channel, I feel like genuinely, I genuinely got along with you and Waleed and, both of you. So that's something, that's a lesson for me in which you're like, okay, even if you don't agree with someone, try and talk to them. So I'm happy that you're here and I'm happy to get cracking.
Yeah, no, me too. I had heard all types of comments from about you from people who follow my work, even Indians who've
Yeah.
said, like you might be too right winger or etc. Which I have not found that at all. I have always found you quite reasonable to talk to, especially whenever we talk, because then we can exchange ideas and
Yeah.
we can point out the flaws that we can't understand in each other's rationality. Then obviously we can go from there. And same is with my friend Kushal as well. I mean, he calls himself a Hindu. He identifies himself as a Hindu very strongly, and
Yeah.
there's certain parts that I just can't get my head around. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's just
Yeah.
something that I can't get my head around. But having said that, I find you guys extremely reasonable. There's someone else I spoke, and I very quickly realized that this guy is not reasonable. Um, and I think that conversations are important. Last conversation we had, I'm not going to go into it, and people can actually watch it on Mali's channel. I actually changed I thought about it afterwards, my position on Kashmir. I actually softened my view a little bit on Kashmir. I still believe that plebiscite would be the best option long term, but I have softened it to a point that India should be given a chance. Now that India is rising, I mean, forget about what was happening until 90s because it was a closed economy, it wasn't
Yeah.
market driven. Now India is rising, India is shining, so there is a chance that, and they are investing a lot of money, as you said, into Kashmir. So India should have an opportunity to actually change the plight of local Kashmiris and maybe improve them economically. And if you remember in our first chat, I said the same thing about Muslims, that if the economic conditions are improved, they're likely to be driven away from the religious indoctrination. So we should give it a chance and then maybe see how people go with that. And so yeah, thanks to you, I actually changed my view on that just because of your conversation.
Yeah, I know. I think that's why talking so important. And there's a couple of things in here, in there, where we talked about that I wanted to touch on a little bit later as well. But let's sort of try and go from the very beginning. And if I'm not wrong, you grew up in Pakistan, and did you? So this is what we should, I feel like, start with. Did you grow up very religious, or were you someone who was sort of who grew up fairly liberal, and then your doubts started sort of building up, or did you go from sort of one extreme to the other?
It definitely wasn't the typical very Islamist family, but it was a
Right.
very conservative family.
Hmm.
Um, my grandparents were somewhat conservative, so they believed in a woman should not wear a hijab or niqab, but they should have a dupatta, right? The talking to men for women and even for men with other women was still something that frowned upon, and they would hide it from their parents. So my uncles and aunties, if they just just trying to talk to a girl or something, they would make sure that their parents don't know. So that kind of conservativeness was there. Now, obviously, then our parents, they grew up as well, so they became when they entered their late 40s, or sorry, after 40s, then they became more independent, and then it's their rules. And so our parents, there was a definite shift between grandparents to parents, and so it was definitely a conservative family, but it wasn't extremely religious. And this is a dilemma that a lot of Pakistanis have, especially it's hard to put a number, because whenever we look at the statistics, and that's what I discussed that in the book in pretty detail, that it's hard to put a number how Islamist is someone. That's why I like to use the word conservative, because that actually broadens the net and includes a lot of people in it. Because conservative could be someone who actually has these traditional values, and he would bring up mashallah, inshallah, and his belief in God is very firm. But at the same time, they wouldn't mind sending their daughters to work. They wouldn't mind sending their daughters to school. They wouldn't mind watching Bollywood movies or dance movies. They might bitch about it. They might say, well, this is very bad, immoral, but they're still enjoying it. So that could include conservative. But then we have real hardcore Islamists and jihadis kind of people. I remember growing up with some of my, I went to a Christian school. It was a fairly decent school. And I remember there were some children, we used to talk about Bollywood movies all the time for the 90s. No problem. But then there were also some children who were not allowed to watch any movies. So that was kind of a mixed, but everyone sort of lived in harmony, at least at our socio-economic level. What was going above us in a higher socioeconomic demography, sorry, a lot of that is dance parties and alcohol was flowing. Yeah. So that was a different world. And extremely lower one, the villages, what I had always heard, that they are even conservative, but they're also very liberated as well. They would be very promiscuous, but they would also they would also kill each other as well if they get caught.
Oh, I see.
So it was it's a pretty complex society, and which is why when I see a lot of people who stand from outside and form an opinion about a country, I immediately start seeing flaws in their rationality, and this is why it kind of troubles me, and that's why I thought I should write a book and maybe speak about it a little bit more, the Pakistani society in general. Yeah, so it wasn't a religious society. It was just a conservative family.
Right, and we were talking a little bit earlier about your journey, and I wanted to discuss that a little bit more as well. The reason I'm asking this is because speaking to ex-Muslims, it's a very interesting story, because I spoke to some people who were like, yeah, someday somebody asked me a question. I went back to the Quran to find an answer to that question so I can shove it in this guy's face. Something logically didn't add up for me, and I said, that's it for me. And then there's somebody like Sarah Haider, who's like, it was a very, very gradual process for me. And was it a gradual process for you as well, or was it a more of a sort of getting hit by a truck moment?
No, it was definitely more gradual, and at one point it became flip-floppy. So I always had a curious mind, but since I've come out as an atheist, I've spoken to a lot of other people as well, and all of a sudden my feeling of being special is gone, because I've actually noticed a lot of people have similar behavior, similar question and similar journeys, so to speak, or similar kind of question and curiosity. Yeah. That I had. I remember asking my mother. We used to sleep up on the rooftops back in the late 80s and early 90s, and then after that, air condition came in, and then everyone got spoiled. So I used to always get fascinated by the night sky. Like, I always would look up, and the number of stars are just so many, and I'm like, what the hell is going on in there? And you got to remember, this is a 9-10-year-old child. And so I remember asking my mother once, who created everything? Who created all this? So obviously her response was God. And I said, who created God? It's a natural, logical question. You don't have to be Thomas Aquinas to work that out, or Aristotle to ask that question. She didn't have any answer, and she probably said something like, don't ask too many questions. Your mind will you will lose your faith or whatever. So there was a bit of discouragement, but that's not how a child's mind that is absorbing so much information around him is going to stop. So that those kind of questions happen. And I remember we went to Tower of Pakistan, because everyone used to tell us the God is the biggest. God is big, it's huge, it's the biggest. So you imagine kids are fascinated about big things, right? I mean, that's what kids love, dinosaurs. I was always my favorite animal growing up was an elephant. And I used to measure up with those Bedford trucks that how high an elephant would be. So we saw the Tower of Pakistan, which is the tallest structure in Pakistan at that time. And I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is absolutely huge. I asked my dad, I said, Dad, was that Alamia? Was that the God? He said, no, that's not God. I said, but that's the biggest thing I've seen. He said, no, God is even bigger than that. So these kind of things were just not making sense. You might think that, okay, well, these are childish questions. But when I look at religion itself, when I started looking at religion itself, and I started finding out there was nothing wrong in my questions. My questions were not childish. I think it's the doctrine of religion itself is very childish. There's a concept of, my parents will tell me, okay, study or do better, get better grades in exam, or don't misbehave, or I'll punish you. And it seems like the same thing, that this creator of this entire universe seems very petty. And he's just so interested in what we're doing. And all of these things were just not making any sense. And obviously, I hadn't read the Quran or understood the Quran at that point. But these things were just not making sense. But anyway, what happened, you put these thoughts away.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, well, I'm not going to think about it. So my point was, from very young age, I had these questions. Maybe other kids have it too. Maybe, I hope, even believing kids have it too. And then between the ages of 15 to 17, or probably 14 to 17, I became really religious, because I was growing up. I was learning more that I worked out pretty early that all the things that I do, listening to music, watching movies, looking at Aishwarya Rai with lustful eyes and all that. This is definitely not something that is approved by God. So if I believe in God, then I have to live by his rules. No matter how unfair I might think, I can't be a hypocrite. I can't say
Do you think that that's the process many people follow? Like, do you think that most people get most of the religious people, sorry, let me correct myself, most of the religious people get religious around the age that you did, or was it something that was exclusive to you?
I think it would be. Well, I don't know. I think everyone's going to have a different journey, but
Sure.
I think most people, a lot of people actually that we know that Imran Khan kind of Muslims are like, okay, well, just enjoy life in your 20s and 30s, and then be a born again Muslim. So okay, now you've enjoyed your party life. Now you're telling the youngsters to just be like you in your 50s and 60s. Sorry, not going to happen. But then there are other types of people too. Like, I mean, I remember Abdullah Gondal had a pretty similar experience. He was very religious in his teens, and then he's like, "This all sounds bullshit." I'm not sure if he had a truck hitting him moment, but I don't know. But different people might have different experiences. So in my case, I was like, okay. So from that period, I was very religious. I ended up. Accidentally, I must add, I wrote that in detail in the book, that how I almost became a jihadi as well. And it just took, and here I was living in perfect luxury at that time. We had a 5-bedroom house. It was only me and my sibling, and comfortable beds and air cons and maids and everything. And then we ended up going to this Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or commonly known as Azad Kashmir.
Yeah.
We ended up there, and this guy who took us there, we thought, my father and I, we thought, oh, it's just going to be some sort of a tourism activity. So we ended up there, climbed the mountain, went up there in this camp, which was trained by Lashkar-e-Taiba. We saw the whole thing, and there was one room, a fairly decent sized room. There were 50 people packed in there. And everyone was just on top of each other. We had 2 nights there, and I was like, oh boy, how the hell am I going to last this? And I just I was just telling my dad, where the fuck did you get me? You know, like I want to go home. And he's like, oh shit, we can't go until the next day. So, so we had 2 days, 1 night. So he goes, you just have to, you know, ride it out.
Yeah.
And there were big plates, and everyone is surrounding and eating from it with hands. I was like, fuck, I'd rather not eat, you know. And I
Oh
didn't
yeah,
eat.
you don't even drink from the same glass, dude. Right.
Yeah, no, I didn't even like to shake hands, to be, to be honest. I mean, and I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't eat, but my father, poor father, was feeling guilty the whole time that what he got his son into, and those big razais, the quilts were
Yep.
freaking disgusting, and all these Molvis are lying next to each other. Literally, they're just like how you see those prison movies in third world countries prison, how, you know, there's so many people packed in. And then I got up the next day. When we got up to this loud thumping, and I got up and I go, oh shit, the guys were actually beating people up to wake them up to go for the morning prayer.
Oh my god.
And it was fucking cold. And I was like, oh fuck, I don't want to get out of this. At that point, like, I was just harvest. He was like, fuck, this nightmare's gonna be over soon. Just sleep it out. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna get out. And so I just became as small as I could, because there was big thick quilts, and you know, you couldn't tell. So, and I was probably a 15-year-old boy. I was pretty skinny and small. So I hid, and my dad was like, get up, otherwise they're gonna hit you. I said, no, you just go. And he didn't want to argue with me, so fuck it, okay. And then he just went to the mosque and prayed, and then he came back. And then after that, so the reason why I'm telling you this story is that I was absolutely repulsed by this whole experience, but how quickly it took me. And when Hafiz Said came and he threw a rocket launcher, there was a massive gunfight shown. There were rooms and buildings, and we were shown that the speech was made. They were shown that, okay, well, some Kashmiri innocents are taken hostage by the Indian army, and the Mujahideens go in and rescue them, and they shoot these mannequins dressed as Indian soldiers. And I was like, whoa, okay. But it was overwhelming. The smell of gunpowder and the noise of gun. It was pretty surreal. I mean, I had never heard a gunshot before, and all of a sudden I was listening to all this, and obviously this all propaganda, and they pump up your adrenaline, and they also pump up your emotions and nationalism and all that. And Hafiz Said then gave a speech, and he was like saying, you know, the Pakistan army are cowards. The 90,000 of them actually. It's funny that he actually came in the army helicopter as well, which is why it never made sense to me later on. So he was bad-mouthing army because he was recruiting youngsters for the next campaign inside Kashmir.
Right.
And then a man was walking with him with the register, and he was just signing up with everyone. And it just happened, and and I said, okay, well, I want to join too. And my father was like, no, he won't. And then Hafiz Said looked at us, and we were in the front line, and there were at least 4 buses load of people there. And I'm not saying this 4 buses like a Western bus where you have 50 seats and only 50 people sitting there. We had people on top of the roof as well, and the whole ride was so scary. I remember wanting to jump
Were
out
you in
of
the bus or on top?
No, I was in the bus, but I wanted to be on the top because the roads were so narrow. And I remember the bus is going so far on the edge that you could see a sheer drop, like a 100-foot drop. And you look at it and you go, oh, I don't want to look. It was absolutely scary. And I was telling my dad, and the bus is really crawling. It's not going any far. I remember telling my dad, I want to jump out, I want to walk. And he was like, no. And then I was just like this the whole time. And it was absolutely scary. But so anyway, so my point was that the speech actually had an impact on someone like me who was somewhat raised in luxury and comfortable house. And I was like, yep, I want to go and die for my country and for my Muslim fellow brothers. And that's why I made a video, and I said, it's so easy for a 14, 15-year-old to be converted. into a jihadi. Anyway, my father said, no, he's going to go in the army, so fuck you, just back off, and we're going to go home. And then we did go home, and within a day, that all went away. You know, like I said, fuck it. I started living my normal life. But that was just one little journey. It was only 2 days, 1 night in Kashmir.
Right.
That I don't have any interesting story of, like I spent a week in there, but that was it. It was very eye-opening for me later on. That I think about it often. And had my father been a bit more religious, or even religious for that matter, or a jihadi, I might have been dead for nearly 20 years now.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even have found my body. Anyway, that changed. I kept on studying, and I wasn't officially, realistically studying Islam itself. I was just looking into the philosophical problems with God. And then I moved to Australia. I put everything on hold. I didn't talk about God. I still called myself a Muslim. I just never thought about it. When I came here, I was like, whoa, okay. There's a totally different world out here. These people are doing fine. They don't believe in God. Everything is just great. And then I came across Richard Dawkins and all the arguments that I looked into, and I was like, fuck, it's making more sense what he's saying. And all the questions I had, they were being articulatedly, if that's a word, they were very well articulated and responded by Dawkins. And then I read the book. I think before the book, I actually watched the documentary. I think it was called The Root of All Evil or something like that, where you go to Jerusalem and ask all these people. So Richard Dawkins had actually a very profound footprint on my atheism.
That's crazy. That's really crazy. What I've always found interesting is because coming from the culture that I come from, one of the things that I notice is that there isn't a fear. I don't have a fear that if I don't do something bad's going to happen to me. There's karma and all that, but there isn't a fear. And speaking to a couple of ex-Muslims, I've realized that a few of them, at least, they had this very strong fear that if I do not abide by the word of Allah, that something bad will happen. And they saw Allah as almost like a something to fear, and that you had to sort of fall in line. And if you don't fall in line, something bad's going to happen. Did you ever feel like you had that kind of fear, or that you had to sort of abide by Islam because you had that fear particularly?
Oh yeah, I was actually, when I was making my coffee, and I was thinking about this, and then because I was talking to Spartacus yesterday about how Christianity and where the other religion actually changed their path, and probably it weakened them to some extent. Like the control over the subjects is not as authoritarian as Islam's, but Islam's biggest strength is probably turning out to be his biggest weakness. How Christians, I'm not going to talk about Hinduism because I just don't know enough, and more I try to understand, more I get lost in understanding it. But Christianity have been there. It's been inbred in every Christian believer that God is love, Jesus is love. Present the other cheek. There is obviously still a very strong concept of hell. So don't get me wrong. I mean, that doctrine hasn't gone away either. But it's not. I mean, the focus, the words matter. When people use words, they matter. They have an imprint on your psyche. And a lot of people still struggle with the word that are we going to go to hell? I mean, even though they become atheists, it's just like, oh, I just don't want to be tortured for eternity. It's like, okay, but it's very hard for a lot of people to shake it off. And I went through that period just for a little bit when I was questioning, when I was becoming almost convinced atheist. But in our society, especially in subcontinent Muslims, you might have heard the saying, "Khuda se daro," be afraid of God. And that was another thing that I just couldn't understand. I mean, God he's meant to be loving us. He's meant to be protecting us. Why the fuck should we fear him? I mean, you don't fear someone you love or someone you care about. You fear a ferocious animal, right? Or you fear a horrible human being. You don't fear someone. You would never fear your mother. You would be more afraid of hurting her, and than you would be afraid of any physical violence towards you. Even though in our cultures we do beat up our kids as well, but I think that's and my mother used to.
Well, that's because they need it. That's because
Yeah,
they need it.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that's changed as well. I mean, I think it's a sheer. I think it's a sheer accident that how many of us get beaten by our kids and we don't grow up hating them. Because in the
Yeah.
Western society, notice how a lot of kids are actually on not on speaking terms with their parents, especially their dads, because they were beaten up by them. And I think there's a
Do you
little bit of
think
a
it's
trick.
because in the West, when somebody strikes their child, they treat it as this huge deal, like this massive life-changing event that, oh my God, you struck him or you struck her. In India, it's just like, yeah, in whatever subcontinent, it's just like, yeah, talak diya, khatam.
Yeah.
Next day your mom's just like, beta aao khana khao and all that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's a trick in that as well. My dad never hit me or any of us. Our dad never hit us, and he never really kind of raised his voice either. So we were not, but we still had a little bit of respect for him. Not, I wouldn't say afraid that he's going to kill me, but it was just okay. Let's not piss him off.
That's
But with
yeah.
mother, but our mother used to hit us. But that beating was also very methodical. Now that I think about it, it wasn't someone like when if you get in a fight and you throw closed fists and
Yeah.
you're smashing things into your head. It was a very methodical disciplinary action. She would turn her sandal and she would hit the top part of the sandal on our butt. So she wouldn't hit the bottom part because she would know that the clothes will get dirty.
Oh wow, that's smart.
Yeah, but she would hit it on your bum and you're like, ooh, it would sting a little bit like a slap, but that's it. But anyway, the conversation is going somewhere else. So, but with God, why are we being afraid of it? So that fear factor was there for a very long time. That okay, what if I'm wrong? What if this is it? What if Allah is the real God and this is a real deal? I'm going to burn in hell for eternity. So when you think about I remember when I first time had sex, I was thinking, oh shit.
Yeah.
This is it. This is a point of no return.
There's no going back now, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
once you go inside,
There's no going back.
there's no going back. You're done. You're gonna spend some time in hell. But at that point, being a teenager, I said, "Fuck it, it's worth taking this." At that point, I was almost convinced. I remember having talks with God, like, "Okay, God, just give me a sign. Just make me scratch. Give me an itch over my left shoulder or something." And longer I would think about it, I would expect that okay, there has to be an itch. And then you start feeling an itch. You go, oh, okay, God exists. So I played all these kind of silly games, but none of that really worked. There were too many philosophical problems. So now when I look back into it, how my mind was actually working, and I narrowed it down to three things, three problems. That came a lot of it came with after that. It came with a lot of my studying into Islam. The first problem, obviously, in my case, was always a philosophical problem to the God. And Dawkins had laid a pretty good foundation for it. Dawkins didn't make any case against Islamic God, for instance. I mean, he made his case against the philosophy of God. Like you look into all these arguments that have been presented forward from Aristotle to Aquinas and later. And so philosophical problem is the first one, such as no evidence for any God. And there are hundreds of other arguments that we can fit into them. Then the morality in Islam is not a good one. That came with with studying Islam. Dawkins didn't help me there. And then the scientific problems in the Quran. And I realized that this scientific problems in the Quran, that is purely manufactured by Muslims themselves, like Zakir Naik and all that. Had they not made these claims that there are scientific miracles hidden inside the Quran, we might not have noticed that. A lot of people might not have cared about it, because how many people, ever since this embryology and Big Bang thing shit started, how many people, serious people, got into it and they said, whoa, hang on, you're just lying. This is absolute nonsense. And then I looked into it and I was like, yeah, well, it is actually kind of nonsense. You would have been better off saying, well, God is vaguely mentioning that. God's objective is not to show you a scientific miracle. Then you might have escaped from it somewhat, but probably not in the case of embryology, I say. I mean, the mistakes are too vivid to be ignored. So these were, when I look back, these 3 points actually got me away from Islam. And now I have absolutely no fear. I don't even think about hell. It's a part of my faith that there is no hell.
How liberating does that feel?
It's very liberating.
right?
It is absolutely very liberating, because I see people. I talk about my mum. Like, I mean, she can't go to sleep unless she's done her Isha prayer,
Mm,
the last night prayer. And she's like, even though she's sleepy, she's like, oh, she's uneasy because she knows she has to do it.
mm,
Um, I can go to sleep whenever I want without feeling guilty at all. I have the best sleep ever. Not that I used to have terrible sleeps in the past either. I used to have bad sleeps every time I would watch a horror movie, right? Because when you believe in angels and demons and ghosts and miracles, these things become more pragmatic. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I still watch a scary movie, I still jump
I
when
was just
someone
gonna
comes.
say that, like, I'm not hugely religious myself, but I still shit
Yeah,
myself when I watch a
yeah,
horror movie.
yeah. But there are the tricks. But then I walked through the graveyards in the middle of the night, and I didn't see anything. Like, this
Yeah,
is the liberation part. But if you believe that there might be a wandering spirit around here, then you're likely to hear that little rustle in the street,
yep,
in the bush. Then you might think, oh, there is something there, but it could be just a fucking cat, right?
yeah,
So those things are very liberating. I don't fear magic. I'm not superstitious. My
yeah.
family, a lot of people in my family, are very superstitious. They're like, don't tell anyone. Nazar lag jayegi, evil eye. You catch an evil eye, your plane will crash. Don't tell anyone you're leaving. I don't fear any of that. I don't fear that if something bad happens to me, like, anything bad that happens, like you have a little car accident, or you forget your keys, you lock your keys inside your car and you have to pay a locksmith $500, and you're like, oh shit. I don't think that someone cursed me or did a magic on me, or I got an evil eye. It's liberating. I go, well, that's just a part of life. You just deal with it.
Right, right. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Because one of the things that I've never been able to wrap my head around is somebody telling me that someone else controls your life. That's something that I've never been able to wrap my head around, and I've never lived my life according to that. I've always lived my life according to only I can control what I do with my life. Nobody else controls what happens to my life. Only I control that. So that in itself has been a very made my life a very liberating experience, because essentially only you can control what happens in your life. I mean, not what happens in your life, but what you do with your life is what I was trying to say.
It's
So
yeah, it's somewhat true, but at the same time, we still have to remain conscious of there are more factors that are outside of our control than they are in our
oh yeah,
control.
that's why I said
But
what
it's
you can
liberating.
do with your life rather than what happens to your life, right?
Yeah, well, there's a strong argument to be made that even what we do may not be in our control either. I mean, we might
Right.
be shaped. So the whole free will is an illusion kind of argument. We could go in there, but the point is, which is I think more important point to focus or ponder on, is that there is no celestial being consciously
Hmm.
making decisions about your life. There's no God up there with a supercomputer sitting, okay, today I'm going to make Harris forget his wallet at home so he comes back from work and then he loses 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then he gets told off by his boss. And then it might start chain of reactions. And then it might happen again next week. And then he's going to get fired. And then he's going to hit financial difficulty. And then he's going to be on the street. And then so people then can tell him, aha, you took on God. See, he fucked you up. So that kind of mentality doesn't exist anymore if you are actually start taking more responsibility for your own actions. I'm not saying you're not likely to forget your wallet at home and having to come back and being late from work and then consequently not getting told off by your boss. That is equally likely to happen. But if you understand that this is your own doing, or it's the doing of the circumstances around you, it's fair game. It's just a part
Yeah.
of it. But there's no conscious decision making. And
Yeah.
that is a big step, because every time this happens in the mind of the believer, they think God is doing it. And if they can't make sense out of it, they say God works in mysterious ways. Jo upar wale ki marzi and all that.
Hmm.
These things are very liberating. And I think that's what we need to focus on, and show the good side of lack of religiosity, so to speak, to people.
I agree with that. I do. Let me ask you this: when at a time, because I know you were never really. I think you were religious when you were a teenager, but not really any time really after or before that. So while you were a teenager, and while you were trying to live, the Islamic life, did you? And this is not talking about India, because India Pakistan is a whole different dynamic as well. But for people that were non-Muslims, did you have certain ideas about them, or did you feel certain things about them that were directed by your faith?
Um, I think I think I had a very popularized version of Islam ingrained in me, which is
Mm,
the good bits, so to speak. That you just Prophet Muhammad was just very lovely person. A woman used to throw rubbish at him, and one day she didn't. Prophet went up, and he thought, "Oh, you're a poor old lady, you're sick." So he started looking after her, and she converted to Islam. See how nice is our Prophet? We didn't learn about any of beheadings and all the poets that were ordered to be killed by Muhammad and all that.
yeah,
So not all of that was not known. Yeah, you can blame my ignorance on that, but I understand most Muslims are like that, because every
sure.
Muslim that I know in my structure, people I went to school with, my family, distant relatives, etc., none of them were educated on any of that. They were just educated on these bullshit stories. By the way, this story is absolutely false. There's
Oh
no
wow, I didn't
evidence
know
of
that.
that there's no evidence of that in any authentic hadith book. It's just totally fabricated much later. And but Islam to me was praying 5 times a day, being good to your neighbor, don't take any bribe, don't give any bribe, and so good bits. So
Right.
you tend not to have any problem with that. You can, okay, that's fine. And so I didn't have that problem, and that's what was driving me to become a Muslim. And when I was in school, a lot of those things were actually cultural. So that's why you might have heard this argument from a lot of people. Oh, this is not Islam. Islam is good. This is local culture, or this is what
Right.
people do. These are bad people who do it. So there was and it's true, there was a lot of, there was a big part of Indian subcontinent culture in Pakistan, especially in our families too. My
Mm,
mother's family was not so long ago were Hindus, probably 3 or 4 generations back.
mm,
They're Rajputs, and there was a lot of superstition in there. There were a lot of Hindu values in them. For example, um, they're a lot more superstitious, so to speak. Like they were more keen on magic, believing, and there was some bigotry of of caste and all that. Whereas my father's side, which were Muslim for a longer period of time. Again, I'm not saying that that's a superior culture. I'm actually glad that there's a huge footprint of Hindu culture in Pakistani family, with all its problems. And I think I
mm.
watched a little bit of your video where you were saying that the Muslims of India are becoming more and more Arabized rather than Indianized. I don't know what exactly words you used, but that was the whole point.
Yeah.
So we had this cultural problem where I went to a Christian school, and every class I went to, there were 3 or 4 Christians, but they were always darker in color. There was always, and we had this word for them that these are chudas. Like chudas is
Mm,
like a disgusting word, given that these are untouchables or something. Despite of the fact that we were very privileged and very special in that sense, that we were specifically going to Christian schools. Most of the other kids who are going to other schools, they're not Christians, because there's a very small minority of Christians, and but they're not even exposed to that much of Christianity that as we are. We just happen to be like, okay, but we were never really friends with them. There was always a little bit of segregation in there, and after a certain time, this bias does build up in your mind and your psyche a little bit. And I had the problem. We had our maids were Christian. I think I told you in Vidu's
mm.
discussion how there was a little bit of these ideas were not sitting well with me, that there is something wrong. So yeah, so my view was, some point it was of pity that these people are wrong, they're going to go to hell.
Right.
But I never really focused that much about it for some reason. Maybe because I was in a Christian school and my teachers were Christian and we all respected them, and those teachers used to hit us as well, by the way. It was perfectly fine, and nobody had a problem with that a Christian is hitting a Muslim student. So we had harmony to that extent. So that wasn't that much of an issue. But I never really thought about it as much for them. I guess I was more selfish. I was
Mm,
more looking into my own problems. That, is this true? Is it not true? Am I going to waste my life over something that is absolute bullshit that's been sold to us? So yeah, I mean, Hindus was a totally different ball game, because that was a different element of brainwash we had. So Hindus are just these idiots who create statues with their own hands and then they worship them. Ha ha ha! How stupid are they? And I remember that this was written in our textbook, and I remember that it was like a rhetorical question posed by the author of the book, the textbook, that these Hindus who create their own gods with their own hands, how can these gods help them whom they're creating with their own hands? And I remember reading that, and I remember saying, well, fair enough, it's a good point, but how can you believe in a God that you can't even see? You know, I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, what is it that I'm missing? Yes, it sounds silly that you create your own God with your own hand, which I've later understood is just a reflection of it. It's not necessarily the literal God, but fair enough. Even that's the case. How can you believe in your God? I mean, your God is not doing anything different. He's not holding weekly press conferences with the leaders of the world in the UN. I mean, your God is just like another story of 1,500 years ago. So it's nothing special, really. So these things never really sat well with me. So I always had a critical mind in that. But again, as I said, the strongest urge is forget about it. Just don't think about it and just get on with your 5 prayers and fasting and live a good life. That's it. And that's what I did for a very long time.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your book. It's called The Curse of God: How I Left Islam. What was your primary motivation behind the book, behind writing out a book?
Well, I first started writing it in 2012, I believe, and I had and I'm lucky I didn't write it then, because I had predicted at that point that Imran Khan is going to be the next prime minister. He didn't become prime minister, but no, but that was for 2013 elections.
Oh, for 2013, I see.
So my prediction was massively wrong, but it was still good that he did become a very sizable party in those elections. And I had made a lot of predictions, which this was the only prediction. But I was discussing a lot of things. So the some references in the book are actually nearly 6 years old. So not that they've been wrong. That's why I didn't exclude them. But my whole view changed about it, because in that 2012, when I look back at it, it was a long time ago. I was 28 back then. And had I done it, I would have been 6 years ahead of my game now. I just think about it every now and then. It's like, well, maybe I should have done it, maybe I shouldn't have. But again, there was still a problem. I was living a life as an atheist for a very long time, very comfortable life. My partner is Australian. Nobody gives a shit. Their family has accepted me. Most of my friends are Australian. Religion never comes up. I've never experienced any racism or anything. My life is or has been great. And that has been a huge part of my personality as well, that I don't have any fear. I don't get intimidated easily. I don't get bullied easily, because I met all these wonderful people who encouraged me, not on this topic, but they just encouraged me so much that I just became a different person. And I guess I was never timid to begin with, but religion is something that you have to be timid when you're dealing with it. So even with that kind of personality, I thought, well, I have no need to talk about it. I mean, everyone's okay. Even my family by this point knows that I'm an atheist. I've been living with a white woman without marriage for 10 or however long it had been at that point, probably 5 years at that point.
Right.
No one cares. So it's okay. You don't have to do anything. And this is one of the biggest grievances of Muslims as well. They say, well, you're living in Australia, living your life, go do fuck, eat bacon, drink piss, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Just don't talk about Islam. That's one of the biggest grievances. So I somewhat bought it at that point. Not because of them saying it, but that was just my general view as well. I don't what do I have to speak for? But then something happened in 2011, and that made me angry when Ayaz's army got arrested, when there was this crackdown. And I noticed that unless we and ex-Muslims or atheists living in West, who are a lot safer, so to speak, I don't have any threats like Ayaz's army or atheists in Pakistan. We have a moral responsibility to actually talk about this and be a voice of these people who are in Pakistan, who can't come out openly. Spartacus is one of them. I mean, he was brave, and he was talking about it. He was doing all this from a position of immense danger, and they paid the price for it. All of them were tortured, abused, ostracized, kicked out of the families, on the run. All of them paid severe prices. while people like me are just, doing basically what we're doing, just sleeping
Yeah.
without marriage and eating bacon and drinking piss, going to the nightclubs and just enjoying life. I was like, this is bad. It kind of angered me when Ayaz's army happened. I opened up my Facebook page, and I still hadn't put my face out there or my name out there.
Right.
I was still thinking, okay, let's just see that, because just a beast that you just are not ready to take on. And more of my fear was my family's going to get.
Yeah, because sorry to cut you off, but I think this is an important thing for the audience to understand as well, because they're like, oh, these ex-Muslims, they just do drama because it's not really that bad, oh, okay, they're ex-Muslims, whatever. But I think a lot of them look at somebody like Kushal and they think that somebody like Haris or somebody like maybe Vidu, Abdullah, they have the same exact situation as Kushal has. Like, Kushal doesn't really face any danger for saying what he says, but for someone like you and for the people that you were talking about that were in Pakistan, there are real dangers there.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's important for people to understand.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's amazing how, and I genuinely believe that people from both India and Pakistan, emotionally, they're on the same wavelength. But what changed, the main factor that put India years ahead, or light years ahead of Pakistan, was a secular constitution. We have a lot to thank for the secular constitution. If it wasn't the case, and to some extent, Hinduism itself is a very pacifist religion. It's a lot peaceful religion, and they've paid a huge price as well. From invaders from the West have come through millennia, and they have exploited this peaceful nature of local Hindu traditions. So yes, we have. None of us can go back to Pakistan. Some of my extremely religious uncles and their kids, I was expecting a backlash from them, but they still follow me on Instagram and my personal Facebook profile.
That's
the one
nice.
which yeah, and I was like, oh, I really am very lucky. I shouldn't say it out loud, because then this might think, we should, we should intimidate him and bully him. But Abdullah Gondal, for instance, his parents have disowned him. His auntie has said that if you ever set foot in Pakistan, I'm going to kill your baby and I'm going to kill you. His baby is only a year and a half old. These are real consequences. Yeah, these are real consequences for these people. And someone like Kushal would never face that. He would face other problems, which I could talk about it later on at some other point. But as far as religion is concerned, there's absolutely no danger for simply saying openly, hey, I'm an atheist. I think this is all bullshit. There's going to be no consequences for him. But in Pakistan, yes. In the Muslim world, by and large, there are severe consequences.
Yeah. And so the book was essentially to talk about your story, right? Your story, your experience, and to maybe give other people. Did you think about that your book is going to act as sort of possibly a roadmap for somebody that had a pathway similar to yours?
Yeah, I wanted to mix my story in that, and my view in that. I mean, if I had titled it that a mind of a questioning Muslim, then that would have made equal sense as well. But it just wasn't as sexy as this one, The Curse of God. It's more powerful.
It's all about the thumbnail, man.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, people do judge the book by its cover or by its title.
Oh yeah.
And we now live in a culture where news people don't even read the article; they just read the caption and they go with that.
Oh, yeah.
We've learned it. We know what's going on in there. So I wanted to mix with that. I mean, I could have made this book a 400-page book where I could have introduced other arguments like cosmological arguments, and starting from Aristotle and then the Kalam and all that. And then the Islamic breakdown of all these different arguments. I could have done that, but I just didn't want to go too technical about it at this point. I just wanted to show some major problems that one runs into the moment they start questioning Islam. These are just at surface problems. Problems like the character of Muhammad. I mean, you make a claim that this is the greatest man who's ever lived, and his example has to be followed for all eternity. Fair enough. If you had said he was the best man for that time, all right, I might have bought it. He was the best among his companions and peers. Yeah, okay, I would have bought it. To some extent, there's some truth in that too. I mean, we talk about him beheading all these people. To be fair, that could have happened to him as well. It was a brutal world. So that I would have bought that. But you make a special claim, and Muhammad himself put himself over and over again on a high pedestal and said, "I am the man. Follow me. You know, I'm going to be the king of all the believers." There's one hadith where he says, "I'm going to be the leader of all the people: Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs, Christians, Jews, everyone on the Judgment Day." And I would. So the one hadith of that too. So this guy has extreme psychological disorder, and he's constantly trying to convince people around him that he's the best man. And Muslims believe it because it's religion. If he was just a politician, he might have been still very charismatic and convincing other people, and they would have followed him. But after a couple of generations, people forget about political leaders. So that's just a natural thing. So I wanted to write more so the surface problems of Islam and incorporate that with my journey. So people who read that, they go, okay, and it's a very easy to read book too. I mean, there are no big scientific terms thrown around, and I didn't want to be pretentious and just throw in, because your editors can actually throw in those words as well. There was one editor who was reading, and it's like, shit, it was written in such language, even I could not understand what it was. And I said, fuck, I mean, what if someone asked me what is this? I wouldn't even know what you're talking about. So I fired her, and then I got it with another one, and I told her, make sure it just stays this way. You just point out the obvious flaws where I've missed the da or or I've missed an apostrophe. Where I've missed the apostrophe or something like that, just simple mistakes, and that's why it just remained in its original shape, and every word is my word, and it's very simple and easy to read. So yeah, that's why I just wanted to keep it a very simple book.
Right. Okay, this is a question that I got from some people on Twitter and some people on Patreon as well, and there was variations of that question. So let me just ask it to you in a way and just sort of get it out of the way. So a lot of people ask that in Pakistan, especially with the Pakistani population, and this is, I don't know, this is obviously tied to religion, but a lot of them see people that are not Pakistanis, that are not from Pakistan, as heroes, that people that came from overseas to Pakistan as heroes, somebody like bin Qasim, somebody like Ghori, somebody like Ghazni. I mean, there's a couple of missiles in the Pakistani army named after those fellows. Do you see that as something that holds Pakistanis back from sort of charting their own destiny, whereas they're kind of reliant on these outside people as national heroes rather than, find their own heroes? There was a question, something along those lines. Do you find any merit to that, or do you just think that it is what it is?
No, I think some groundwork has to be done to change that. Who was the Sindhi king? I forgot his name. The one who fought bin Qasim.
Oh yeah, Dalraj or Dalveer or something like that. I remember something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he laid his life down. He fought bravely. Unfortunately, he lost. That kind of a history should be taught. The few people who are starting to speak about it, Hassan Nisar is one of them, where he just blasts all these invaders. I remember
there's a Punjabi. Is Hassan Nisar Punjabi?
Yeah, he's Punjabi. Yeah.
Oh, there's another Punjabi author that I forgot what his name was, but he's also pretty open about it. That we're from here, we're not from anywhere else.
Yeah. Aftab Iqbal is another one. I haven't heard him speak about Ghaznavi or Mahmud Ghaznavi or Babur or bin Qasim, but he does. When it goes to West, when it comes to Alexander the Great versus India versus Porus, he just puts Porus right up there. He's Porus is the man. He's the guy. Like he's our son. He's the only one who sent Alexander the Great the back. he doesn't call him Alexander the Great. He just calls him
Alexander.
Egyptian, no, Greek Alexander. That's what he just calls him in Urdu. He calls it Skandar Yunani Skandar.
Oh, I see.
So he doesn't call him the Great. So okay, that's fine and good. You're invoking a little bit of your own identity in there. But is that because Alexander the Great was white? But why can't you take the same stance against Mahmud Ghaznavi or Babur or Muhammad bin Qasim? Why? So a lot of people, I remember in our school, all these was they were called Pak studies or the subcontinent studies in our school. All these guys were presented as heroes. And I remember discussing that with my mom. My mother has done masters in history. And I said, well, these, and she told me, she said, Mahmud Ghaznavi, he was a robber, basically. He just came in, looted the local treasure, killed and plundered, and went back. What's so heroic about that? Fair enough, that's how everything was back then, especially in the Arab and the Western world. Probably not so much in the Indian culture, and probably not so much in the Chinese culture either. They've been pretty pacifist as well. They got fucked by the Mongols pretty hard. There is some element in that. So people, I think it's very important that we start saying that out loud. There's Marvi Sermat. I don't know if you've heard it. She's not really that popular, but she wears saris and she calls herself even an Indian.
Oh, wow.
Poor woman cops a lot of abuse from all these Twitter jihadis. She speaks quite openly against these so-called heroes, and I think there's a time that it has to be done. When Pakistanis, it's a very important, it's a philosophical and identity crisis issue that you don't have to be ashamed of your brown skin, or you don't have to be ashamed of the fact that yes, your ancestors were Hindu. Fair enough, you don't view that religion as a good religion, as a right religion, but at least you don't have to be ashamed of that. A big part of that is all these colonials, like Australians and Americans, they don't apologize for their ancestors for killing the natives. They say, okay, they did what they did. They were who they were. We're not them. We're not ashamed of them, and we're not proud of them either. And it's the same way you should not be ashamed of your heritage. That yes, you as I said, my mother's side, 3 or 4 generations back, they were Hindus. They don't even give a fuck. But our father's side, whenever they used to have fights, they used to say, "Oh, these guys," because as I said, like there's some elements are very Hindu influenced, and our father's side, who've been Muslims for a lot longer than 8 or 9 generations, they say, "Oh, we don't have these beliefs in magic and all that. This is all comes from these Hindus because they're freshly converted." So there was a little bit of embarrassment in there that, oh yeah, we were. So they shouldn't be ashamed of that. But there is another part as well where they say, well, we were Rajput. Rajputs are so high up in the caste system.
Oh yeah.
They're like, yeah, we were Rajput. We were the warriors.
No, and the Rajput isn't even just about the caste system. It's the fact that we were the sword. We were the fighters. While people sat in their houses and theorized, we went and fought on the battlefields. Yeah.
Rajputs are just next to Brahmins, right? They're just the next level. So there was an element of pride in there too. But then, it's all messed up because it is a foreign religion, unfortunately. It is an Arabian religion. This is why. And Iranians have the same problem. Iranians have never been accepted as Arabs. They've always called themselves Persian, and they always said this is an Arab culture. This is an Arab religion.
I was gonna just ask you that. If you watched the protest, the anti-government protest that happened in Iran, and a major sort of theme of those protests is that we're Persians. We want our Persia back, and that's a pretty major theme of those protests.
Oh yeah, and again, because they have a rich history. But the problem here is, and the key difference is, Persians can go back to Persia and they can relate it to them. There are no living Zoroastrians around who have become nuclear powers, or they've had a rivalry for 70 years. There's no such thing. Zoroastrianism is just a dead ancient Persian religion. So you can't feel sympathetic towards them that before Islam we were all that. So you can invoke that type of nationalism. But here, what are Pakistanis going to say? We want to be back to Hindus. Hindu is whatever problem Arab might have, but Hinduism is not a religion that I'm interested in. So that's the problem they have, and not because and as I said, the big part is the fact that India is seen as the Hindu, and we've fought 4 wars with them. They're out to get us. They want to destroy us. I don't like India. I don't like. So at the back of their mind, they still have that thing. So that's why they can't relate to Hinduism the way Persians, the modern Iranians, can relate to ancient Persians. So they might be a little bit more successful. That's why we need a different approach altogether in Pakistan. We need the approach of the approach of this descent, this religious descent, which is atheism. I think the atheism itself, and under the banner of humanity, not just a banner of a local identity, like I'm Indian or I'm a Hindu or I'm a Pakistani. Just the atheism, and I'm sorry to say, it might sound like it's a lot more Western influence, and that's one of the apprehensions of these people who dislike ex-Muslims, especially in Pakistan, the intelligentsia that is like, oh, these are too Western influenced people, as if same problem, as if like, oh, West is some horrible thing that you can't even learn anything good from them. Same way they say, oh, these are Hindu agents. So these are the walls that we have to knock down one by one, and I think that's the only way I am confident and hopeful that people will keep changing. People, that amount of nonsense and bullshit in Islam, it just cannot be ignored, and that is going to be Islam's biggest failure.
Yeah. I think you make a very interesting point about the sort of differences between the Persian setup and the Pakistani setup. I also think that there is a value to cultural identity without religious identity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's the Persians that are talking about, we're not Arabs, we're Persians, we want our Persia back. They may not necessarily even be talking about we want to all be Zoroastrians again. The way it's just said, we're a Persian culture, man. Why can't we just be Persians and not have to have Zoroastrian move into the 20th century or 21st century, but at least retain who we are? Because A, we're never going to be Arabs. B, Arabs are never going to accept us. So I mean, it's an exercise in futility.
Yeah, but they can go back to ancient Persianism. What can Pakistanis go back to? There was no ancient Pakistan. I mean, that India is tied down with Hinduism. It was the major force in there, and the psyche is still the same. That religion still seems. You might have seen the Abhinandan video. I mean, what is the fucking point of asking what is your religion? What difference does it make? He's an Indian, and that's a huge problem in Pakistani society. A lot of people comment, and the first time they become aware of my work, they ask me, it clearly says, I'm an atheist or whatever. They say, so what religion are you? Right? Religion is so important to these people that they just cannot imagine the world without it. So this is why I think the next step is fuck the past. Whatever happened, let's be honest, our ancestors did not know as much as we know now.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
There was wisdom, so don't get me wrong. I mean, Isaac Newton would say, some people say he was very intelligent, and yeah, if he came down in the room today, he would just blow us out of water. But he would not have the information, and he would need some time to catch up. He would not understand evolution straight away. He might actually not understand it at all. So there was wisdom in our ancient people, but they didn't have the knowledge or the information that we do. So based on our information, we can devise a future. We can plan a future, and that's why I say
I think that's a good way to put it.
And that's why I think these identities, Kushal is big on that. That it is my identity. I just don't see any relevance in that. I mean, I don't feel like I have to tell anyone I'm Pakistani. I'm an ex-Muslim. And political correctness is actually taking us there, where you might have seen some videos where people are saying, oh, if someone looks Asian or Chinese or something, that people, even though they speak with perfect American accent, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Alberta, Canada, or whatever. So, and then, oh no, I meant, where are your parents from?
Where? Yeah.
Yeah. So So and then you're being frowned upon. Why are you asking that question? I am Canadian. So that is, we are going to get to that stage where these identities are going to be meaningless. You can identify yourself. I'm a doctor. I've saved 1,000 lives. I'm a philanthropist. I'm a politician. Those titles can exist. You might also argue these are very shallow.
Do you think, though, that we're honestly going to get to a space where, you know, a person asks an Australian, "Who are you?" and they say, "I'm Jack," and that's it. You know, they won't say, "I'm Australian." Do you think that that'll happen?
Oh yeah, I think it's already happening. I mean, I don't
Really?
know. I speak to a lot of people. I never get asked, I mean, what's your background? Where are you from? So I do sometimes get into it. Sometimes some people do ask them, but a lot don't, especially in a younger generation. Just notice next time, people under the ages of 20, what do they ask you? This is a generation that is growing under this influence of political correctness. You're not supposed to even ask your gender. So you know, you I mean, this is the first thing we see. That person, he has long hair. Is he a man or a female? No. You can't even ask that. Race has become a 40-year-old issue now. So race has evolved so much that you don't ask. Okay, yes, there is there's a lot of bias and I wouldn't call it racism, but there's a lot of bias and discrimination where people actually either speak with very thick accents or where they can't communicate. And then a lot of people get either frustrated with them, and as a result, their rudeness is more visible. Which is why I've actually noticed a lot of my friends from Pakistan, when they come, they actually feel that they are being racially vilified or profiled a lot more than I have ever felt. For some reason, my goal was, as soon as I came to Australia, my goal was I'm gonna try to learn and speak English, not only just in English, just like an ordinary Pakistani or Indian, or just English. I wanted to learn the Australian accent. I worked so hard, and I learned every little bit how certain words are pronounced. And within 5-6 years, people stopped asking me. For example, when you go for a job interview, right? It's a part of legal requirement. They would ask you, "Can I see your passport so it has a work permit on that or not?" After 5-6 years, I remember when I got my part-time job, he didn't even look at my passport. And everyone, and then it was still early days, and probably still now, where certain words would slip out of my mouth, which would be purely desi, right? And they're like, "Oh," and a white dude would say, "Oh, you have a bit of an accent. Where's that from?" So then I would go that way, but it wasn't really going. And now I barely get asked. I never get asked, and I think there would be a point when these things will become even more trivial than they are today.
Yeah, I think I definitely do see your point. I think there's definitely value in that. I find it hard to think that there's ever going to be a point where borders are just never going to be an issue, or people are going to be like, well, I'm not American, I'm a human. Because I feel like one of the things that we're noticing, particularly in the West, and I think that's growing more, is they're talking about, oh, Western civilization. We belong to the Western civilization, Western values. They've created these set of values, whether or not they, you know, some of them are taken from Greek and Roman values, but they said, okay, this is our value, these are Western values, this is us, and they make a real identity claim of that. So they're not making a claim that, oh, we're white. They're not making a claim that, oh, we're American or we're British or we're that, but now they're making a new claim that we're Western civilization. So do you really think that there's ever going to be a point where they're going to be like, yeah, no, Western civilization or Western values aren't a thing, we're just all human?
The answer is in your question itself. I mean, they no longer say, well, we're French or German, or to some extent they do say it, but on the whole, like, the European Union is the biggest evidence of that. That yes, there are some problems with Brexit, and I think it eventually will come back again. Because they have found a common ground, and this is why they can all relate to each other, and they call that Western civilization. Now, why do they have to insist on that? Because there's a clear difference in the Eastern civilization. By Eastern civilization, I don't mean Indian and Chinese. There's a big elephant in the room, which is the Muslim civilization, which seems like the biggest threat to the Western world at this point. Where on one hand you have a totally different definition of human rights. People are having a discussion what pronoun we should have for certain genders, and here we are just persecuting homosexuals, or telling women they can't go to school. They have to make that distinction, and as long as these type of people exist, this clash exists, there's going to be this definition. For example, as I said, when the immigrants were coming into Western world after post-World War II, race was a big issue initially. The Paki bashing was real, and America had their own problem, but they still do as far when it comes to Black America. I think they still have those problems, but those problems have constantly been declining, and there's recognition of these problems. And they have to remain on the course, and I think the trend suggests, and it actually troubles me, and someone is going to notice that at some point later on in our future history, when our Eastern values actually catch up a little bit more. And as I said, I don't blame Hindu or Chinese civilization for most of this Eastern civilization has been hijacked by the Muslim civilization, which is right in the Middle East. Well, actually, yeah, Middle Eastern philosophy. That's what they should call a civilization. They are the ones that are driving this wedge between us, between the globalist humanistic values that we have. Imagine China and India. China is a way off because it's not a democracy, so we don't know which way that's going to go. But India, with Japan, is another example of a kind of like a Western country, right?
But I was just going to ask you that when they talk about Western civilization, even though Japan's a pretty advanced country, they don't necessarily include Japan in there, right?
Well, the economy is Western, the human rights definition are Western. Yes, they have strong culture and tradition, which will remain. I mean, the Indian culture will remain, but it's a definition of the universal rights that we have. And okay, for example, why is India and or even Pakistan, for that matter, are treated differently than some than North Korea or dictatorships? Because there is a common element. Pakistan does go up and down, and when military comes in, but hopefully that stays out of the picture now. But these countries are treated like, even though they're in the heart of the Eastern world, but they are democracies, right? So their democracy is still seen as a Western concept, because Greeks were the first one to do it, and then Roman did it. Whatever. They call it, okay, this is some footprint of Western civilization. Human rights, for instance. I mean, Pakistan gets forced, probably not by its own will, gets forced every year by the European Union and the Human Rights Organization to do better and improve the human rights conditions. And those human rights are unfortunately defined by the Westerners, even they might not be true. The first secular principle was written by Cyrus the Great in the Cylinder of Cyrus. He was a Persian, right? I mean, why are they claiming secularism as you could argue that, okay, well, Indians were always welcoming, the ancient Indians were always welcoming to other cultures, and it's evident, quite evident. So they were probably secular in nature as well. They might not have called it secular, or they might not have put it on some sort of a cylinder.
Yeah.
But Cyrus the Great did it. And Cyrus was not a Westerner by that stage. And a lot of people recommend that he was probably the first true secular hero, who actually included all religions equally and all that. And Romans, to some extent, later on were quite tolerant as well. But then Christianity came and shit hit the fan. So these civilizations will remain there, and these identifications will remain there as long as we have differences. The moment differences start going away, you're not going to. I'll give you an example. Let's just say Pakistan gets involved with India, becomes a part of India again. Would Pakistanis call themselves Pakistanis? No, they would call themselves Indians. So these differences will remain as long as we have these differences.
I don't even think of that as a realistic solution, to be honest.
It's not going to happen.
I think of a realistic solution where it's like a sort of a confederation, the way the EU is. That's more of a realistic solution than like forming one giant country, which is just unwieldy and inefficient.
I remember a quote from Jinnah's book. No, he didn't write it; it was his biography. He said that after the initial upheaval, we will end up becoming, he said that in 46 or 47, that after the initial upheaval, we are more likely to become like Canada and US. So he was also predicting that at some point, but he didn't realize what a cesspool of just bullshit this region is going to turn into because of that. Again, he was a human. He got certain things wrong. He was quite brilliant, but he still fucked it up. And we're just left with it, and we have to deal with it. Yeah. So I think
just quickly to your point, when you were saying about Japan sort of having a modern economy, having modern values, modern culture, modern definitions of human rights. Yeah. But at the same time, retaining that Japanese culture, which is their very rich old Japanese culture. And they don't necessarily see that as abrasive to each other. They don't necessarily see those two things as mutually exclusive. And I think countries over the world can develop a system like that, where America gets to keep whatever American values are, but still be part of the world. Poland gets to do that. Ethiopia gets to do that. And why can't countries eventually obtain something like that, where, again, I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking specifically about culture and cultural imprint. Why can't countries maintain their cultural values or whatever their cultural setup is, and still modernize and get rid of the things that get in the way of that modernization?
Yeah, because you're fighting against a very strong force of nature, which is modernization in a sense. I mean, I think there are, I can't remember how many languages are being lost every year from world. And as our civilization is becoming more and more global, the local cultures are getting threatened. I hear your point that you're saying, well, get rid of the bad bits, but retain the good ones. The good ones will remain anyway. If there's a culture of geishas in Japan, is it going to survive as we become more and more global? I think we are pretty global. That's fine, but I think that looking back, the amount of languages we're losing, the amount of rituals we're losing, especially in the developed world. I'm not talking about third world countries, because they obviously have to catch up. The cultures, there would always be some sort of a culture. For example, an American would never understand what cricket is, even though they are almost the same, except for just a little fancier accent from the people across the Atlantic. They're quite similar with the history, the food, and their values, but they would never understand what cricket is. So those kind of subtle differences, I think, will remain, because there will always be certain differences in people. And if you want to say sports are part of culture, then yes, they are. And but to expect for things to remain the same way they are, in a way that they keep all their good values, I think a lot of those values, a lot of those traditions, a lot of those the rituals, I think they're going to suffer. They're going to pay a price. Pakistanis can say, well, Westerners, they say it all the time. People like Oreo Biscuit, Oreo Makbul Jan, the idiot. There was a women's rally in Pakistan recently, and he was just going off his head on that. And the most common argument is, what kind of feminism do they want? Look at West, their women have become prostitute and they have no shame and no honor and all that. Dinosaurs like these can keep crying all they want. But where is the line of the honor in that culture? Which one is it? Is it wearing a hijab, taking off a hijab is dishonorable, or wearing a dupatta, replacing a hijab with a dupatta, or then even taking off the dupatta and just wearing jeans? Is that dishonorable? Or what is the next step, like if you wear a short skirt instead of jeans? These kind of things throughout history have always kept evolving, and at each and every step, one could argue, or that generation could argue, that is my culture and I want to retain it. And so, to be honest, I don't think any culture is culture at the point. And Ronald Reagan, I think, he said that we would realize we will all become one part of one species, one culture, when we get attacked by an alien civilization. And I think language remains the biggest hurdle, though.
Do you really think of language as a hurdle? Because I think of language as something that adds such an incredible amount of diversity to people.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
way
Well,
language is expressed in different parts of the world. I
oh,
mean,
yeah.
even like, goodness knows I have problems with Islam, but I wouldn't want to get rid of Arabic. I think Arabic's a beautiful language.
No. I'm not saying whether they should be lost or they would be lost, but I think eventually they will be lost. Eventually, we will have, and I'm not saying they're going to be replaced by English, because English is not going to stay stagnant either. English is going to evolve as well. We will. English is already a global language. It is already a language of the elite, even in the countries like, where there's no, they don't encourage speaking English. It is already an elite language, and more youngsters, this internet generation, they are getting educated in English and they're communicating more in English. So English is becoming kind of a language, even though you have billion people. And look, cultures, the might, the economic might does matter. I mean, some people say maybe this century might belong. We might all start learning Mandarin, and Mandarin might become a global language. Whichever language would that be? The smaller languages will be the first ones to go. And I know you don't want to lose Sindhi language, you don't want to lose Gujarati or Pashtun, but they are already paying the price. They are already losing their value. And as I said, that's when you become a global civilization. Borders is another one. When the civilization does become the borders do go away. And I think that's eventually going to happen. Probably 200 years, I don't know when. But a homogenous society would be, by homogenous, I don't mean by skin color, I mean the values. They have homogenous values. Then there's not going to be enough reason. I mean, how come it's so easy? If you're an Italian, you can easily just get up and fly to America, because not much is going to happen. But if you're a Pakistani, fuck that, you're not even going to get a visa. Because of the key difference in the values. If Pakistan was just like any other normal country, the values were similar, they would have been fine. Yes, economy would have been an issue still, but economy is also likely to. The global economy is improving every decade or so. I mean, what we're earning, what we can earn, when our purchasing power parity, what it was 100 years ago, is just like 100 times better. So that is always improving, and I have a feeling, as we become more and more global as a civilization, a lot of languages are going to go, a lot of cultures, traditions, and hence consequently the identity is going to change as well.
That's pretty idealistic. I really do hope it turns out. I would hate to lose some of those languages, though. But we'll see how that turns out. All right,
you might not be around.
I probably won't be around, but who knows, man? Who knows what happens in the next 50 years? I can just get like a bionic body and like a bionic brain and just stay alive as a robot for. I wouldn't mind that.
That might happen in 20 years.
Yeah. I know. I can just download myself somewhere and be like, you know what? I'll just come online after 1,000 years.
Yeah, like that Johnny Depp movie.
Yeah, like that Johnny Depp movie. It was shit, I heard, but yeah.
Yeah, it was
same idea. Okay, let's take a couple of questions. So this question comes from Hara on Twitter. Hara is asking, why do you think Islam, despite many of its major claims being debunked so thoroughly, holds so much charm within the Muslim population?
It's a part of the early development, really. I mean, people are not willing to accept the alternative. It's the hardest part of being a social commentator or an educator is the fact that, or even a politician for that matter, the hardest part is changing people's opinion. People hold certain views, certain opinions, be it about their country, be it about their religion. They have formed this opinion. They've held on to it for a very long period of time. Most of them opinions form from a very early age, and it's almost impossible it's a very difficult task to change that opinion. So they react. They react to it. They want to hold on to their feelings, their beliefs and opinions, and they want to look the other way. I know more Muslims who say, I'm not going to talk to you about religion, than Muslims who actually say, that, okay, I'm changing my view, or I'm looking into it, or I'm not, or arguing with me for or against it. I know more people who just say we're not going to talk about it because in their minds they think that their opinion is going to be changed by my words, and it's something inconceivable for them. And it's again going back to that ID thing where people are very sensitive about their IDs, that they don't want to lose it. And to me, people like me, I just say, what the fuck? It's just another title. Just throw it away. So I think that's the main reason why people find that charm in the religion. But even though it's so superficial and they're not willing to accept, it's the same reason. I mean, I've been arguing with the whole Michael Jackson scenario right now. There's a camp that is saying, well, it's all bullshit. The other camp is saying, it's not bullshit. I'm on the part that he definitely had some issues, but I think he might not have molested, or he might have, I mean, he was not an idiot, so to speak. I mean, he would have known that holding a hand of a child is inappropriate, or at least it's going to attract some attention that is not going to be good for your career or your life. Or sleeping with them is not a good idea by any stretch of imagination. But did he actually molest someone? I believe in a system that we have to have firm evidence to convict someone. He definitely had issues. So I'm like that. But then there's vigorous debate going on because people have formed opinions and they're just not willing to shake them. And religion or nationality is a lot worse and a lot more dear issue to people than Michael Jackson being a pedophile or not. So if they're acting like that, or Michael Jackson, imagine how they would act like that. So that's why it's a challenge.
Yeah, and there's a question which is sort of similar to that by Pradeep Bajpai, who's asking, a lot of people say that economic development is what's going to solve the Islamism problem, but he says, there are countries that are very rich in the Middle East that are still spreading that ideology and spending a lot of money to spread that ideology, particularly in countries like India and Pakistan. So is it just economic progress that's going to solve it, or he asks, is it going to be like progressive, agnostic, atheist voices that are going to really challenge this status quo?
Obviously, I mean, you always need free thinkers to challenge the existing idea. I mean, but I think it's a little bit of an unfair comparison because some of the dynamics are a little bit different. Because the Middle Eastern countries, these are theocratic states. They're authoritarian states. So that's why, despite of the fact that they have money, and it's a newly found money, these countries are not. They don't have a history of academia
industry.
or industry or growth. It's just like winning a lottery, and we know what happens to most of the lottery winners. They actually end up losing their money, and they just don't know what to do with it. But people who actually work hard and accumulate their wealth over a period of time, they actually are much more. They have higher chances of being successful. So democracy doesn't exist in those countries, but countries like Pakistan and more so in India, there's a lot more democracy, so to speak. But the political democracy is pretty good in Pakistan, but the religious democracy is lacking in Pakistan, which is slowly denting. Democracy is such a good virus that it slowly starts spreading. It's what the traditionalists call it, that they are corrupting the minds. But the progressive thinkers say, well, we are changing, we're evolving for better. And whether you like it or not, it happens. Like, I mean, there's a transsexual woman who's a news anchor in Pakistan. We don't call them khusres and hijres, and we laugh at them, and that's happening. And people are scared now to call her a khusra or anything, these words, or hijra. People are scared. They don't want to say that. That I told you about that person who made derogatory comments towards Hindus. Most people came out and said, "Yeah, good on you. Fuck him off." Women are coming out now. They're saying "Khana khud garam karo," and things like that. That is a lot more aggressive debate. But there are a lot of people seeing that. Yeah, well, she might have a bit of a point. So that's what democracy does. It starts the conversation. But on the other hand, just across the Arabian Sea, in Saudi Arabia, women who ask for to be given right to be able to drive cars have been imprisoned. All those women, despite the fact that Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, wants to be called as a liberator of women, is doing that to women. Whereas in Pakistan, I don't know if you remember Asma Jahangir, she was a huge critic of
Yeah.
the social structure, the patriarchal nature of the Pakistani society and all that. She was a champion for a lot of people, and she still is. And I think she's inspired another generation of women activists who are coming forward. There is a bit of a problem with the Pakistani feminist movement, which I see. I think they've gone straight to the fourth wave rather than starting from the first wave, which is again the same bit of a problem. So they're going into the argument of, okay, like don't call history, call it herstory, or don't call it Manchester, call it Womanchester. So they've gone into that rather than actually focusing on the core issues that 70% of Pakistani women who live in villages, can't even. A lot of them, a huge majority. I don't have the exact number, so don't quote me, but a huge percentage of those women take contraception pills in secrecy because they want to. The women are realizing, and Christopher Hitchens said that if you want to get rid of poverty, there's only one solution to it. That is empowering women. And if we have empowered women, women said, no, that's it. 2 kids, fuck off, no more. And once she has that power to actually dictate those terms, we're going to have a better tomorrow. We're going to have a better population control, and we're going to have more educated people, and quality is going to be better. So those are the things that our feminist movements should actually be focused on. And I'll still take it. But I think it's a democracy that changes it. Economic freedom comes from it because democracy evolves minds.
Because the democratic principles are in place.
Yeah, and it evolves mind. And there's a reason why India, a lot of people don't understand. Pakistan has a very similar bureaucracy system to that of India. It's not a bureaucracy like Arabian countries where the guy wearing a tobe is sitting at every desk, and the normal Indians and Pakistani immigrants are doing the other shittier jobs. So it's not like that. They have a very structured bureaucracy, very corrupt too. Don't get me wrong. But there's a system in place which is highly influenced by the British Raj, the British India. So and the strong democratic principles. I say again, as far as politics is concerned, religion is off the topic. You don't talk about. So those things are slowly happening, and economic. I think I said that in our first conversation. I think economics is just going to be the result of that democratic principle and economic change. Those jihadi, those Saudi Arabs, as hardliner as they are, they would never come up to me and risk going to jail by trying to stab me. They would never do that because they have they're enjoying the air-conditioned cars, the houses, and they're enjoying the Rolls Royces. So no matter how fundamentalist they are, they're never going to risk going to jail for me. Why? Because they have a lot to lose. And if you have a lot to lose for a lot of Pakistanis and a lot of Muslims, and the same reason why African Christian countries are so bad. They're burning witches, they're killing people, apostates as well, because again, they've got nothing to lose. The poorer you are, closer you are to religion. Middle East is just a different example, and it's just a phase. It's just a phase because there's no democracy in there. And democracy is eventually going to happen. I mean, we lost, 5 different countries in the Arab Spring. It's going to happen again, and they're going to evolve. They're going to take another 10 years before the democracy evolves and turns into something like India or Pakistan in maybe 10, 20 years. So it's going to eventually happen. But democracy and economy.
Right. Okay. Let's take another question. This is from Muazzam Abdullah Khan, who is asking, this is a good one. He's asking, why is Haris such a hypocrite? He said he's against nationalism, and he goes and talks to bigoted Hindu nationalist Sham Sharma. How can you explain your bigotedness, Haris?
Well, a lot of. I was actually thinking maybe he might be an Indian Muslim that he's going to say instead of bigoted Hindu. I was going to say he's a nationalist, and he supports a very pro-Pakistani view, because that's what I get accused too. That
really?
That I'm a pro-Pakistani, so I'm a secretly. I could be jihadi in disguise.
ISI agent.
Yeah, I could be jihadi. Some people say no, but he's a hypocrite because. Look, you can't please everyone. To answer his question, I believe in talking and communication. I never think there's, contrary to popular belief, I am not as arrogant as a lot of people think. I genuinely believe that more I speak with people, more my mind expands, my horizon expands, and my views change. I feel so happy every time my position changes or something, I don't feel embarrassed on that. I've actually written a whole chapter on that, the sub-chapter in my book about change of mind. Change of mind is one of the greatest human traits. A lot of animals are stuck where they're stuck because they behave instinctively, first of all, and then they don't have an effective way of communication. So whatever they learn, a lioness is going to teach her children for next 20 generations the same way as she learned it from her parents.
Yep.
And that's how it's going to remain for thousands of years. But we have this amazing tool, this little organ in our mouths called the tongue, and make it work with your brain, and then we can communicate, and this communication can actually change our position. And that is the reason why in such a short amount of time in geological scale, we have been to the moon. And on the other hand, we can't work out whether Muhammad flew to heaven on a donkey or not. So there's a discrepancy there, but we have this diversity exists because of our ability to communicate with each other. So why do I speak with Hindu nationalists? I think I have given my fair share of criticism to Hindu nationalists. You might have had a better question had you said that why do you agree with them? Then you might have had a better case. But I don't think I've ever agreed with any point on this on nationalism, so to speak. So I really don't understand what your problem is, because I think you should agree with that communication is good. I
just don't think he likes you talking to people that don't agree with his worldview. I think that might be it.
And also, that's just like similar to saying that, well, Harris criticizes Islam. Why does he talk to Muslims?
Yeah, pretty much.
Silly. Yeah.
All right. To finish us off, you said that you grew up talking about Bollywood movies with your friends. So there was a question who was asking, what's your favorite Bollywood movie? Who's your favorite Bollywood actor?
Well, there was a stage. I haven't watched a lot of Bollywood movies in the last 15 years or so. Ever since I came to Australia, I think I really, really fell out. There's a couple of movies in between I tried to randomly watch, and I really cringed on those movies. Some of them were really bad.
Cringe is heavy. Yeah. Welcome to 2010s Bollywood. The cringe is heavy.
Yeah. There's some of them are really bad. I mean, it's just like they've got this technology, but they just didn't know how to handle it. So there's the hints of Hollywood happening, but then it doesn't fit in. The best example one is that Amir Khan's Doom. I think it was Doom 3.
Oh, yeah, Doom 3. Yeah.
That was pretty bad. And then there was one more movie from Hrithik Roshan. I couldn't watch it more than half an hour. But Doom 3 I watched. I just love the Doom music, and I love Hrithik Roshan's dance. I mean, he's just, as far as dance is concerned, he's so handsome, and his physique is so gives you an awe that, wow, that is an amazing physique. He's just lucky. The proportion of his legs with his torso is just perfectly fine. I mean, people always used to talk about before him that Salman Khan is the greatest body. Now look, and so growing up in the 90s, my favorite hero was Salman Khan, and I hated Shah Rukh Khan.
Really?
Because I wanted Salman Khan to be more successful.
Oh.
And then somewhere along the way, I realized that I appreciate Amir Khan more just because of his acting. There's some parallels to be drawn. I don't know if you can see it or not. Amir Khan is kind of like a Tom Cruise of Bollywood. It's the same sort of height and same sort of ego. It's a very similar type of demeanor, I feel. Luckily, Amir Khan is not a Scientologist, so it's not as twisted as
and like Amir Khan is one of those guys, that at least tries. I'll give him credit that he at least tries to make smart movies.
Yeah.
Whether he hits the mark or not, that's completely up for debate. I'm not debating that. I'm just saying that he at least attempts.
Yeah.
I'm just giving credit to him that he attempts to make smarter movies, where someone like Salman Khan knows what his formula is. Salman Khan knows what works, and he will do it till the cows come home.
I think, but I think Salman Khan's last movie, I think, was it Sultan? No, I don't think of a. Yeah. Oh no.
Sultan, was it? I think it was Sultan, right?
Yeah. I think it was. There were two movies came out. One from Amir Khan, one from Salman Khan. They were both on wrestling and all that. I think I watched.
The Amir Khan was Dangal.
Yeah, I watched Dangal. Oh, I think I watched Dangal. I never watched Salman Khan was okay. I might watch it now. But other than that, I never watched. In the early childhood, in the late 80s and early 90s, it was all Anil Kapoor.
Anil Kapoor.
And Ram Lakhan, AG, Banerjee. Those were the greatest days. And my uncle, my mother's brother, he was obsessed with Amitabh Bachchan because he was obviously from his generation.
Yeah.
He slightly younger than Amitabh, but you always tend to like people who are older than you. Like, for example, I don't like Justin Bieber for a reason. Like, fuck off, who's this kid? And that's why I never watched the current post-Khan era actors. I don't know who they are. People who are younger than me or whatever. So he used to like Amitabh Bachchan, and I was watching Amitabh's classics of the 70s and the early 80s in mid 90s because he was such a big fan. He had the VHS, the VCR, and then I remember in Doordarshan when I actually saw, this is before internet and all that. Amitabh is like this extremely tall, somewhat very
lanky.
Yeah, somewhat very handsome in his own way. And then I saw him in person on Doordarshan in live. At this point, a post-Kuli accident that he had, and he had just ballooned up, and he was just a different guy anymore. Just no longer a lanky, tall, thin man. I was like, oh, I don't think I like this guy. But then for a very long time, I tried to like him, and I watched a lot of movies, Khuda Gawai, and all those movies that came after that. So yeah, I think Rishi Kapoor was another one. My mother was.
My dad was a huge fan of his dad, Shami Kapoor. I don't know if he was dad, but uncle or something. Shami Kapoor.
Yeah, Jungli. Yeah, Shashi Kapoor was another one.
Yeah, Shashi Kapoor was another one.
Shashi Kapoor was. I'm so happy. I mean, it's just reminding me of all my memory. Shashi Kapoor.
And they're from. I'm not wrong. I believe his family's from Peshawar.
Yeah. Oh, these guys were.
Yeah.
These guys were, again, see, there's a bias in there that this entire Kapoor family, because they're very light-skinned and they're almost white. Shashi Kapoor almost looked like a white man.
Yeah.
And he had this immediate following, immense following in Pakistan because of that. And this is the reason why Imran Khan became so popular as well, because he just was this good-looking guy, and me and Dad could never replace him in that part. It's just bizarre that we live in a society, despite of knowing that these things are wrong, but we still tend to give advantage to those people who kind of look better or even just lighter skin color. It's just bad. But anyway, so Shashi Kapoor, Amitabh Bachchan, then Anil Kapoor and Rishi Kapoor as well, and then obviously the Khans came. My sister was big on Shah Rukh Khan. She used to pray for his success. I used to pray for Salman Khan's success. But at the end, I realized at some point I was falling in love with Amir Khan. After that, as I said, like in the after 2005-06, I haven't really caught up with the movies. I mean, there are an entire generation of actors after that. Priyanka Chopra came after, and I have never watched any of their movies. So yeah, I kind of fell out. There's some movies I tried to watch. That's why I thought I'm gonna be. And it's a different world now. We don't have time to watch a new Bollywood 3-hour movie every day. We just don't have time for it. When we get our entertainment from, when we're watching 3-hour podcasts on YouTube. I find that the world has changed so much, and there's so much interest in that. It's just bizarre that people would rather watch two strange people speaking on YouTube rather than watching a big budget special movie, especially made by people. I think this shows us how the world is changing, and people are getting more and more interested. This is not just some fringe minority that would always talk about it. There's so many successful YouTube channels where they amass millions of hours of watching hours. Watch time. Yeah, so it's just I think the world is changing, and entertainment always has to be there. Now that's the culture that I think we should protect. But is it gonna protect when we might end up losing a language and we have one global language?
Yeah, I feel like 80% of the Indian population will fight to the death to protect Bollywood.
Don't mind, include some Pakistanis in there as well. And
there you go.
And that's another thing.
We'll take them, man. Yeah, 100%.
Now, listen to this fact. And this was another thing that actually kind of worried me a lot. Everyone in Pakistan was in love with Amitabh Bachchan and Neil Kapoor's and Rashi Kapoor's and Govindas and all these guys. Sanjay Dutt was another one. They're all in love with these guys. We forget about it, right? When we're watching the problems of an Indian household, you don't think that they're Indians. You don't think they're Hindus. You're just connecting at a human level, and that is so important that all the walls come down. But then obviously, then you have armies invading each other, and you go, fuck them. These are bastards. It's a totally different ballgame. But those things matter, and I think it was a good step in the Musharraf era when it happened that the Bollywood movies were being now shown in the cinema, but now I think they've taken off again because of this recent problem. This is very disheartening because you feel like after all that progress that you had, and some fuckers do what they do, and what are we going to do? I'm worried about one more thing that we spoke about, and I think we're deviating from the subject, but I'll just very efficiently wrap it up. I am worried about another thing, and I remember this is, I'm just echoing what other people have said before me. When Mumbai happened, I think Imran Khan was probably a nobody back then politically. He was always a superstar, but he said, what's going to happen if something else happens again? And now I'm worried of what is going to happen, because it looks like the narrative for a conflict between Pakistan and India has actually really dumbed down in the last week or so. But there's still talks that something might happen. I'm worried that...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm worried what would happen if something else happens again before the elections. If there's another terrorist action, what is going to happen?
I genuinely think that both India and Pakistan realize that a war is not in their best interests. And as much as, even Pakistan likes to say, hum atomic taqat hai, I genuinely believe even Pakistan realizes that even a nuclear war is not in their interest. Like, who gains from a nuclear war? Nobody gains. I think what happens is a certain amount of chest beating over war makes people of both countries feel a little better. They feel that, our leaders are in charge, our leaders know what they're doing, and we trust a person who is strong. Everybody trusts a person who shows strength, who shows calm, who shows leadership. Everybody trusts them. It's a natural instinct. So I feel like when Imran Khan says it in Pakistan and when Modi says it in India, people feel safer. People feel better. People feel like, okay, we have a guy in charge that knows what he's doing. But I also think at the same time that both of these countries realize that an all-out war doesn't really help anyone. It's not really going to resolve anything, unless you're talking about, let's just end one of these countries. It's not really going to help anything at all. So I genuinely don't think that people see that as a realistic option. People see other ways as a realistic option. Like, we were talking about this before, like creating economic pressure, creating political pressure, supporting progressive voices, ex-Muslim, whatever voices in each country, and sort of helping de-escalation that way. So I understand your concern that, the rhetoric has been ramped up. And so sometimes you feel like, where is this rhetoric going to end up? But I don't see this, because this is a zero-sum game. Nobody wins in an open war, really. So I don't think either country is too keen on war. They're just keen on getting the message out that if something happens, hum taiyar hai, I'm ready. I think that's what they're trying to get across. That, hey, don't worry, we're here.
Well, yeah, when I said I'm worried about them, and obviously I think I've said it numerous times, I don't think that the nuclear war is ever going to take place, because they're not idiots. They know that it's just fuck all. And not only just that, the two countries will fight, the entire region, probably the world, some people estimate that the nuclear winter can take over. No, my point is, as I said, all the progress that we've made over the years, okay, let's exchange cultural things, and soft culture is so important. The exchanging of the artists and playing of the Bollywood movies. I mean, these things are so important that they're really connected at human level. It's not sports are good, but sports are competitive. But the actual artists, the exchange of artists and playing of Bollywood movies, etc. There's no competition there. then you're not saying, oh, Rima Lagu is a Hindu, so let's hope her bahu gives her a hard time. No one says that. So those things are good, and my worry was the point that if something like this happens again, how far back is it going to set us? 10 years again gone. I am hopeful that once whoever comes to power, I think they are going to try to do something again, because it's still a fresh government from Imran Khan. He's showing somewhat interest in de-radicalization. They have made some sort of a policy of how to bring these people into mainstream, de-arming, taking weapons away from them, de-weaponizing them, and bringing them into mainstream politics and mainstream economics. We'll see how that goes. It's a long-term process. I told you it's like a beehive.
Right.
You can't just grab it.
And look, when you're talking, when you're talking about how far back it'll set us, I genuinely think, and you might not agree with it, but I genuinely think that 90% of the people in India, when you talk to them about like Pakistan, they have the way they talk, yaar, apne hi log hain, bas hai galat kuch problem ho rakhi hai, there's a problem here, but apne hi log hain. This is the kind of attitude that a lot of people, when you talk to them about Pakistan and Pakistanis, have. And in Pakistan it may be weaker, but what I feel from in India, because that's the experience that I know of, from speaking from an Indian perspective, Indians genuinely feel that civilizational connect is so old that this 70 years of this partition and this animosity is not an irreparable bridge, or an irreparable burnt bridge, is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of people view it as that, and I know a lot of people scream and shout on the internet, oh, Pakistan ko nestanabood kar denge, ye kar denge, wo kar denge. But talk to people like face to face, talk to like half intelligent people face to face, and they're going to be like, that's not an option. Yaar, ye apne log hai, apne log ko maar ke kya karenge? So there's a very strong sentiment of that. And yeah, there's been problems for 70, 80, maybe longer, whatever you want to call it, years. But at the end of the day, that's the point that I'm making. The civilizational connect is too strong for people to think, ki, Arey, hatao, khatam karo, destroy everybody. That's not, I don't think any Indians really going to think like that.
Wow, it's a big country and very complicated. I think there are all types of people in our countries. There are people who want to destroy that, and then send jihadi groups to India. Then there are also people who also think that that if there's nothing in fighting and conflicts, let's just make money and have fun and send us Katrina Kaif here for a concert. Like there's a lot of people like that too. So let's just hope. Let's hope it just doesn't set us back.
I'm extremely hopeful. Despite I've always been an optimistic person, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that in the future, how long that takes is bloody anybody's guess. I'm not a good guesser anyway, so we'll see. But you I hear, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up our asses, but I will a little bit. But what I'm trying to say is, what we're doing here is on a very, 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 very minuscule level, but we're just having conversations, and conversations can change things. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, no, that's great. As I said in response to that guy's question as well. I mean, I don't know, and we have a luxury in a way that we are not dictated. We're not politicians. We're not in any official position, so we can freely speak what our leaders can't speak. They have to think about a lot of things that they can say, and the things that they can say, they can't say. And I think it's very lucky for some of us that we are in a position that we can actually exchange these ideas. We can speak to people, and we have a reach where certain people listen to us, and they might, we might be able to change someone's view. And I see that as a great success, as a great tool, I say, for a change. And change is always happening, whether you like it or not, whether you stand against it or not. Change is always happening. We just have to make sure that the change is for better, because there have been bad changes. Iranian revolution was bad. I mean, the revolution in Afghanistan was bad. Well, it wasn't called a revolution, but whatever happened with
a coup.
Yeah, that was bad. I mean, Cuba and all the Russian Revolution, and a lot of things happened. But eventually, I think people and humanity itself rises from the ashes, and just the fact that every century we have been better than the one before says a lot about our about the strength of this human spirit. Even though I don't believe in spirits, but there's something in us that just makes us better. The blips that come in and go, but 1,000 years later, people would have totally different problems. Yeah. And a lot of people wouldn't even know what Islam is or Christianity is, probably wouldn't even know what India and Pakistan were. There might not be India and Pakistan, it might be something else.
Yeah.
So it just looks like an illusion because we're living in that, and time is so slow. But on the grand scheme of things, it's a blip. And so it's just anyway. Well, let's just stay hopeful and see how things go. And thank you very much for having that. And I just want to say, I did try spend a lot of time in design of the cover, and so because I know
check that out. Check that beauty out.
A lot of people judge the book by its cover, and it definitely looks very pretty.
As they should. It's a good-looking book.
Yeah, well, it's not bad. Yeah, the cover is not bad. I really like it, and it's like the chains breaking off. Like, I mean, why I left is with a very strong message behind it. That's literally how it feels. That you asked the question as well, and that's literally how it feels. Big relief that you don't have to live with all this baggage. There's a chapter called "The Baggage of Religion" where I listed all the things that you either lose them if you take Islam seriously, or you adopt them, but then if you are intellectually honest, you would live with the guilty conscience that you're doing things that are against your faith. And when you get rid of this baggage, it feels great relief that you don't have to live with that guilty conscience anymore.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'll tell you what, I'll leave the Amazon link to the book in the description. Go check it out. Go support this great work that he's doing. Again, I want to make sure I thank Haris for coming on the show today, spending some time with me. I had a really fun chat, time talking to him, and I'll be happy to do this again soon.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I'd definitely love to. Yeah, I always love talking to you.
All right, man. So thanks again for doing this, guys. Make sure to go follow Haris. I'll leave his Twitter link in the bio as well. I'll leave his Facebook page in the bio as well. And of course, go check out his book. It's called The Curse of God, How I Left Islam. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe to the show's channel and consider supporting the show on Patreon. I'll see you guys for the next episode. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I'll see you guys soon.